April 1st, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, Translation of Fragments, 1, Ennius, Annals, Fragments, Books 1-6. Quintus Ennius was born in Rudii in southern Italy, in about 239 BC. His Annals was a highly original poem, both in its form, it was the first major epic poem in the Latin language, and in its subject matter, dealing with the whole of Roman history from mythological times to events of the poet's own lifetime. Up until the end of the 1st century BC, the Annals was the most commonly read Latin poem. After the poem was superseded in popularity by the Aeneid, it remained of interest to grammarians for the large number of archaic words that it contained, and it is for this reason that many lines have been preserved from the poem, allowing us to reconstruct the outline of its 18 books. This translation is by E.H. Warmington, 1935, with a few changes. See Key to Translations for an explanation of the format. The suggested context for each fragment, shown in red, is often just a conjecture. Click on the L symbols after the line numbers to go to the Latin text of the lines. The links to passages from other Latin authors will display the Latin text of these passages. Contents, Books 1-6, lines 1-209, Book 7-16, lines 210-426, Book 17-18 and unplaced, lines 427-565, Book I, Prelude. From the sack of Troy to the death of Romulus L1L. The first line, Invocation of the Muses. Vero, in Ennius there is. Muses, who with your feet beat mighty Olympus. By Olympus the Greeks mean the sky. 2-3 L. Exhortation to readers. Homer, seen by Ennius on Mount Helicon in a dream, was the source of inspiration. Probus, as for the neuter gender the syllable is short. Ennius in the first book for my subject and my poem shall have renown among the peoples of Italy. Fronto, Homer's instruct res was Calliope, Ennius' instructors were Homer and Sleep. Marcus Aurelius, to Fronto, and now I pass to our poet Ennius, who you say began to write after sleeping and dreaming. But surely if he had not been roused out of his sleep he would never have told the tale of his dream. 4L. Fronto, to Marcus Aurelius, if ever fettered in soft calm sleep as the poet says, I see you in dreams, there is no time when I do not embrace you and fondly kiss you. This is one proof of my love, which I take from the Annals, a poetic and dreamy one indeed. 5L. Homer appears Cicero, when Ennius has dreamed, this is what he told of it. Homer the poet appeared at my side. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 1/16 April 1st, 22, 2:54 a.m. 6L. Ennius, Translation of Fragments, 1, Opening of Homer's speech. Cicero, unless indeed we choose to believe that Ennius, merely because he dreamed it, did not hear the whole of that famous speech. O loving kindness of your heart, as well as he would have heard it if he had been awake. 7-10 L. Homer tells how his soul migrated into Ennius' body. Vero, these two, sky and earth, correspond with life and body. The wet and cold masses form the earth, and whether we assume that the feather-furbished tribe is wont to be delivered of eggs, not of life, according to the words of Ennius, and after that time life itself comes to the chicks by a god's will, or, according to Zenon of Citium, that the seed of living things is fire and this is their life and soul. 11-12 L. Vero, right therefore is the statement of Ennius, and earth who herself bestowed the body takes it back and wastes not a whit. 13 L. Donatus, I remember seeing instead of having seen, Ennius I remember becoming a peacock. Scholiast, Perseus Prol 2-3 alludes to Ennius, who states that in a dream he saw a vision of Homer on Parnassus. Mistake for Helicon, Homer said that his soul was in Ennius' body. 14 L. Romans must remember the place where Ennius dreamed Perseus 6 feet 9 inches, take note, yes citizens, of Luna's harbor, it is worthwhile. Thus commanded Ennius in his senses after he had snored out his dream that he was the Maionian Homer, Quintus at last out of a Pythagorean peacock. Scholiast, this line he took from the poems of Ennius to put into his own poem. It is well then that he says, thus commanded Ennius in his senses after he had snored out. That is what Ennius says in the beginning of his Annals, where he states that in the course of a dream he saw a vision of Homer, who said that he was once a peacock, and from it, according to a rule laid down by the philosopher Pythagoras, his soul had been conveyed into Ennius. 15l. Beginning of the narrative. The fall of Troy. Priscianus, veterimus, is as it were derived from a positive veter. Ennius has, when aged Priamus was laid low beneath the warring Pelasgian, 16 to 17l. The lineage of Aeneas, Assaracus, Capys, and Anchises. Servius Octus, Assaracus was grandfather of Anchises. Ennius from Assaracus sprang, Capys best of men, and he was from his loins begetter of Anchises the loyal. 18 to 19l. Anchises probus. Ennius pictures to himself Anchises as having the power of soothsaying by bird lore, and, through this, something of the prophet in him. Thus www.adaluze.org/poetry/nnews1.html 2 16th April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, and shrewd Anchises, to whom Venus, loveliest of goddesses, granted power to foretell, and to have a godly heart of prophecy. 20l. An approach of Venus, Servius Octus, to float instead of to fly, as in a passage of Ennius in the first book. Along she floated swiftly through rare wafts of mistiness. 21l. Venus appears to Aeneas and his companions, Festus, sos for Eos, for example. Ennius in Book I. Thereupon she, hallowed among the holy goddesses, took her stand close to them. 22 to 23l. She tries to persuade Aeneas to obey Anchises and retire to Mount Ida. Festus, that the ancients used the term to plead for, to deal. Ennius also was a witness when he wrote in the first book of the Annals, but be sure to do what your father pleads for in prayers with you. 24l. Italy and the Latins, Macrobius. There is a region which the Greeks call by name Hesperia. Virgilius, n_1530. Ennius in the first book. There is a region which mortals used to call Hesperia. 25l. Vero. That Cascus means old is shown by Ennius, because he says which the old and ancient Latin folk did hold. 26l. The early connection of Latium with Saturn, Vero. Men have recorded that once upon a time this hill, the Capitoline hill, was called Saturnian, and hence Latium has been called Saturnian land, as Ennius among others calls it. 27 to 8l. The fortunes of Saturn, Nonius, Saellum is neuter. In a masculine form. Ennius to Saturn, whom Saellus sky begot. 29l. Why he fled to Italy, Nonius, obsidio neuter in Ennius, when great Titan was afflicting him with cruel duress. 30l. Aeneas and his followers arrive at Laurentum in Latium, Priscianus, Laurentus for Laurens. Ennius in the Annals. These men one day Laurentum's land received. 31l. Aeneas meets the king of Alba. The story of Ilia, the daughter of Aeneas, Attilius. The shortest hexameter has 12 syllables like this of Ennius. To him answer made the king of Alba Longa. www.adaluze.org/poetry/nnews1.html 3 16th April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Servius. According to Ennius, he Romulus will be reckoned with Aeneas among the gods. Servius. Ennius says that Ilia was a daughter of Aeneas. 32 to 48l. The dream of Ilia after the death of Aeneas. She gives birth to Romulus and Remus. Cicero, in Ennius the famous Vestal, tells her story when the old woman roused up, had with limbs a tremble brought a light, then the maid, frightened out of sleep, spoke thus in tears: O daughter of Eurydica, you whom our father loved, now strength and life to leave all my body. For a man of beautiful looks seemed to hurry me away among pleasant sallow thickets and banks and places strange, so, my own sister, after that did I seem to wander alone, and slow-footed to track and search for you, but to be unable to catch you to my heart, no path made sure my stepping. Then it was father who seemed to lift up his voice and speak to me in these words: O daughter, first there are hardships to be borne by you, but after that, your fortunes will rise again from a river. With these words, my own sister, did father suddenly withdraw, and no longer gave himself to my gaze, though my heart longed for him. No, even though many a time and with tears did I keep holding out my hands towards the blue precincts of the sky, and called him with caressing voice. Then did sleep scarcely leave me all sick at heart. Ovid, if a woman should take the annals, there's no poem shaggier than they, she will perforce read how Ilia became a mother. Servius Octus, Navius and Ennius record that the founder of the city was Romulus, grandson of Aeneas through his daughter. 49-50 Ilia, arraigned for her fault, appeals to Venus, Nonius, Perumper, speedily and quickly. Ennius in the first book of the Annals I pray you, hallowed Venus, the mother of my father, to look down on me from heaven a little while, my kinswoman. 51 Ilia appeals also to Tiber, Macrobius, and you, sire Thebris with thy hallowed stream Virgilius, N_872, Ennius in the first book and you, father Tiberinus, with your hallowed stream. 52 Venus answers Ilia's prayer. Chrysius, the grammarians would have it that the form Neptus should not be used and Ennius is appealed to because he wrote Nepos as a feminine, thus Ilia, godly granddaughter, the hardships you have borne. 53-4 Servius Octus, cetera, that is in ceterum, and it is an Ennian usage for the rest, take you no care for the boys to whom you gave birth. 55 Amulius orders Ilia to he thrown into the Tiber, Nonius, faces seer means to do. Thus he spoke out, and then the hireling warriors sprang to carry out his word. Porphyrio, according to Ennius' account Ilia was thrown headlong into the river Tiber by order of Amulius, king of the Albans, but before this she was joined in marriage to the Annio. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 4/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, 56 Ilia is married to Tiber, Servius Octus, Reddita must, as an archaic usage, be taken to mean data, Ennius in the Annals but Ilia, rendered into wedlock. 57 The gods assemble to decide the fate of Romulus. Tertullian, Ennius the poet spoke simply of most mighty dining halls of heaven either on account of their lofty position or because in a passage of Homer he had read of Jupiter feasting there. 58 Servius, on bipatentibus in Virgilius, with twin openings. This mode of expression is Ennian, and is drawn from the use of doors which we unclose both to right and left. 59 The assembled gods, Jupiter, Macrobius, Atlas whirls on his shoulders the sky dotted with blazing stars Virgilius, N_4482. Ennius in the first book who spins round the sky dotted with shining stars. 60-1 Martianus Capella, the colleagues of Jupiter himself amount to twice 6 in number, including the thunderer just mentioned, whose names are contained in a pair of lines in Ennius Juno Vesta Minerva Ceres Diana Venus Mars Mercurius Jovis Neptunus Vulcanus Apollo. 62 Speech of Juno, she agrees to the deification of Romulus, Servius, on Sanctiorum in Virgilius, N_4576 we must either put a comma after sanct or else he used the phrase Sanctiorum after Ennius Juno. Hallowed among goddesses, daughter of Saturn, made answer, 63-4 Jupiter foretells to Mars that only one of his sons shall be deified, Vero, in this book I shall speak of words which find a place in the poets. I will begin with this one there will be whom you shall raise up to the blue precincts of the sky. 65 The Tiber overflows a second time, Festus, remanent, they seek again. Ennius in the first book the waters left their channels and flowed back into the plains. 66-9 Jupiter orders Tiber to subside, fronto, it was done. This same verb is used by Ennius, the broken places to be dammed up, he says it was done the Tiber and a noteworthy act. Tiberis is in Tuscan dialect Tiber, which you order to be dammed up. The river Tiber is lord and ruler of all flowing waters round those parts. Ennius www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 5/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, after the river which is chief over all settled down for whose sake Ilia did sink beneath 70 the trough holding Ilia's twins Romulus and Remus is cast up by a fig tree which was later called the fig tree of the Paps. Chrysius, Phaci. Ennius sweet-bearing figs, dripping milk from the whole udder. 71L The she-wolf suckles Romulus and Remus, Servius Octus. The noun lupus was in old writers certainly common to both genders, as in Ennius suddenly a she-wolf big with young Servius. The whole of this passage Virgilius, N_8630 is certainly modelled on Ennius. 72-4L The wolf sees the shepherds and flees, Nonius, Perumper, speedily and quickly. Thereupon the she-wolf gazed and saw them all, then she, passing over the plain with quick lope, hurriedly betook herself into a wood. 75-6L Romulus and Remus sport with the shepherds, Nonius, Licitari, to engage in battle, to fight. Ennius some hurled stones in play and jostled one with another. 77L Romulus as a hunter, Festus, Ratus some means I thought, but apart from this Ratus and Radum are put for firm, sure. Ennius they were cut down when Romulus the resolved won his quarry. 78L Romulus is reconciled with Numitor, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, N_8150 Give and take you plighted troth, there are within us hearts brave in war. Ennius in the first book give and take you plighted troth and make a treaty truly firm. 79L Romulus and Remus wait for daybreak, to take the auspices Macrobius, and the dead of night held hid the moon in a black mist Virgilius, N_3597. Ennius in the first book when the dead of night held hid the light above, 80-100L Romulus and Remus take the auspices, Romulus founds the city of Rome. Cicero, and thus Romulus, as augur with his brother, likewise as augur, as takes place in a passage of Ennius then, careful with a great care, each in eagerness for royal rule, they are intent on the watching and soothsaying of birds. On a hill. Remus devotes himself to watching and apart looks out for a favorable bird. But handsome Romulus makes his search on high Aventine and so looks out for the soaring breed. Whether they should call the city Roma or Remora, this was their contest. Anxiety filled all the men as to which of the two should be ruler. As, when the consul means to give the signal, all men look eagerly at the barrier's bounds to see how soon he will send the chariots forth from the painted mouths, so they waited. Thus were the people waiting, and held their tongues, wondering to which of the two the victory of right royal rule should be given by the event. Meanwhile the white sun withdrew into depths of night. Then clear shot forth, struck out in rays, www.adaluze.org/poetry/nnews1.html 6/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, light, just when, winging to the left, there flew from the height a bird, the luckiest far of flying prophets, just then all golden there rose up the sun. Thrice four hallowed forms of birds moved down from the sky, and betook themselves to places lucky and of happy omen. From this saw Romulus that to him, to be his own, were duly given the chair and throne of royalty, established firm by the watching of birds. Glossary, of Rome there is no known founder common to tradition. Ennius and others say it was founded by Romulus. 101L Remus scoffs at Romulus and his wall on the Palatine, Festus, quamdi, for quam. Jupiter. Yes, truly relies he more on a wall than the might of his arm. 102-3L Romulus threatens Remus with death, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, N_9420 Meanwhile you shall none the less pay full recompense to me with your life blood. Ennius in the first book Neither you nor any man alive shall do this unpunished, no, you shall give recompense to me with your life blood. 104L A mediator or Romulus, seeks to heal the quarrel, Nonius, Torvitor. But he whom you just now so fiercely noised at 105L Festus, some for eum. But by stratagem, not by brute force, should he seek to save the state. 106L After defeating the Sabines, Romulus celebrates public games and dances, Grammarian, when Romulus had built a temple to Jupiter Feretrius, caused greased hides to be spread out and held games in such a manner that men fought with gauntlets and competed in running races, Ennius bears witness to this fact in the Annals. Servius Octus, and some think that Lentandus is a coined word of Virgilius, but in the annals we read rubbed down with oil, supple and ready for taking arms. Paulus, noise of war was a term the Romans were wont to use of dancing when they danced with weapons. This was an institution of Romulus so that he should not suffer the like of what he himself did when he dragged off the maidens of the Sabines at their public games. 107 Rape of the Sabina women. A Sabina speaks, Festus, Sas. Varius believes it means Eas, his witness being Ennius on the ground that he says in the first book maidens, for the Romans have each their own at home. Where it seems rather to mean Suis. 108 Rage of the Romans against Titus Tatius, Precian. In the nominative authors are wont to add the short syllable te instead of met. Ennius by yourself, Titus Tatius the tyrant, you took those terrible troubles. 109 Hersilia mediates between the Romans and the Sabines, www.adelus.org/poetry/nnews1.html 7/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Festus, Stolidus, silly, for to fight out a quarrel by force, it is a thing of boorish bores beloved. 110 Carisius, concorded here. Both of you, while away your days in friendliness forever. 111 Hersilius prayer, Gellius, Ennius also in the first book of Annals Nerio, consort of Mars, and here likewise if he has preserved the meter, which is certainly not always the case with him, has lengthened the first syllable and shortened the third. 112-13 Romulus and Titus Tatius establish a double kingship, the Sabines form a new tribe at Rome, Nonius, fortunatum, prosperously. And may this, I pray, turn out in fortune, prosperous and fair for me, our task, our plighted troth, our kingdom, and for you, my citizens. Vero, according to Ennius, the Titianses were so called from Tatius, the Ramanses from Romulus, the Lucares, according to Junius, from Lucumo. Servius, according to Ennius, Romulus will be reckoned with Aeneas among the gods. 114-15 Lproculus tells the people of his vision of Romulus, Servius, Evum properly means eternity, which comes to none but gods. Ennius Romulus lives from age to age in heaven with the gods that gave him birth. 116 Romulus and Hersilia are worshipped by the Romans, Nonius says, Ora, goddess of youth. The I worship, Father Quirinus, and the, Ora, consort of Quirinus. Book 2, The Reigns of Numa Pompilius, Tullus Hostilius, and Ancus Marcius L 117-20 The people mourn Romulus, Cicero, indeed when a people is bereaved of a just king, then even as Ennius says, after the passing of the best of kings, for many days longing filled their breasts and at the same time they talked thus among themselves, O Romulus, godly Romulus, what a guardian of your country did the gods beget you. O father and begetter, O blood sprung from the god. They used to call those whom they had lawfully obeyed not lords and masters, nor yet again kings, but guardians of their country, yes and fathers and gods. Nor was this without reason. For what do they say next? You it was who brought us forth into the world of light. 122 Festus, Spurs. The archaic writers used this plural form, for example Ennius in the second book, and so soon as he fled away, our hopes he thus utterly www.adelus.org/poetry/nnews1.html 8/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, 123 Question of a successor to Romulus, Festus, Square Rome, a name given to a site on the Palatine in front of the Temple of Apollo. Ennius has this place in mind when he says, and what man hopes that he will be king of Square Rome. 124 The reign of Numa Pompilius. Numa visits Egeria, Vero, in a passage of Ennius to him replied Egeria with sweet sound, the word Ali has the force of Ili, from Aulus, Alia. 125-6 The religious institutions of Numa, Vero, in a passage of Ennius he established the tables, He also the shields and cilia is a word derived from ambicysis, because those arms were indented on either edge like those of Thracians, and the pancakes, the bakers, the rush dummies, and the cone-haired priests. Liba are so called because they are made to be used at libations. The victories are so called fingandes libes, the term RGI is derived from Argos. Tutulati is a term used for those who at sacrifices are accustomed to wear a kind of cone on their heads. 127-9 He institutes the flamines, vero. Ennius states that Pompilius also established the special priests. Although all are surnamed from individual gods, there are special priests whose surnames remain obscure in origin, as is the case with most of the following which are enumerated in these verses. He likewise established the priests of Volturnus, of Palatua, of Furina, of Flora, of Philacer, and of Pomona. 130 Numa asks for his institutions to be maintained. War between Rome and Alba. Festus, the ancients used to say me instead of me, as does Ennius when he says in the second book, if something of man's fate should happen to me, do you keep my ordinances? Propertius 3.35-7, and I had already put puny lips to mighty fountains, whence once Father Ennius did slake his thirst and sang of the brothers Curii, and of the Horatii and their spears. 131 The triplets are ready to fight, Priscianus, in this way, therefore, mu omicron sigma omicron and omicron correspond to me tui and sui, mu omicron sigma omicron and omicron to mis tis sis. Ennius, a great and strong anxiety is mine to do equal deeds with my heart fellows. 132 The fight, the surviving Horatius escapes a thrust. Festus, a casus, a passing away of the sun, for example, when it drops down from the heights to regions beneath the earth. Ennius used this noun for occasio in the second book. This chance was given him, but renowned Horatius with a leap. 133 Horatius justifies himself to his sister, who loved one of the Curiatii, Priscianus. We find very ancient writers who even lengthened the penultimate, sc of perfects in ui. He agreed that he would join issue with me by the sword. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 9/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, 134 Horatius' sister heaps reproaches on him. Festus, toll rare, to bear patiently. She would choose to suffer slaughter by the sword rather than by words such as these. 135 She cares more for her dead Curiatius than for all the Romans. Festus, quamdi for quam than for all your legions and commoners. 136 Horatius' father pleads for his son at his trial for killing his sister. He pictures the mother's grief. Festus, some for eum. But that him whom she gave forth into the world of light, she. 137 The prosecutor, or one of the two judges, accuses Horatius. Festus, ning ulus, no one. Who are one to threaten with the sword, while against you no one. 138 Progress of the trial. Festus, tuditantes means tundence, that is, conducting an affair. They spent the whole day threshing out this trial among themselves. 139 The punishment of Metius Fuctius by Tullus for refusing to help Rome. Quintilian, Tinga of Placentia, by writing Precula for Pergula, was guilty of two barbarisms in one noun. But Ennius, arraigned on a like charge of a double mistake by saying metoioque fuctioio, is defended on the plea of poet's license. 140 He is torn apart by horses. Macrobius, tractare means to pull again and again. Ennius dragged over the smooth flat plain. 141-2 and birds devour his corpse. Priscianus, the oldest writers declined homo, general hominis. Ennius, a vulture did devour the poor man in the forest. Ah! In what a cruel tomb buried he his limbs. 143 The destruction of Alba Longa by Tullus. Servius, on clangor in Virgilius, states are generally overthrown to the sound of a trumpet, in the way in which Tullus Hostilius ordered Alba to be overthrown. Priscianus, in nominations, that is in onomatopoeias whether nouns or verbs, of unusual structure, we must not look for all the turns of inflection terra tantara. Aeneas and the trumpet in terrible tones terra tantara blared. Servius, on Virgilius N_2486, and the dwelling within. This passage is taken from the sack of Alba. 144 The reign of Ancus Marcius. His accession, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 10/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Servius Octus, on reddita in Virgilius, reddita must, as an archaic usage, be taken to mean data, and that day when Ancus Marcius received the kingship, here recipit stands for accepit. 145 The foundation of Ostia, fortifications and other works, Macrobius, a most happy expression of Virgilius George_2462 is belches forth a flood, and archaic too, for Ennius says and the river Tiber belches into the salt sea. 146-7 Festus, Quisir is put by archaic writers instead of Quirera. Ostia was fortified. He likewise made the channel clear for tall ships and for sailors seeking a livelihood on the sea. 148 Servius Octus, some say that Teximus is the right term to use because the places in which ships are made are called in Greek nu alpha upsilon pi gamma iota alpha, in Latin text rena. Ennius for them too the plain holds a workshop for their long ships. 149 Festus, Ennius seems to have made a jest and in the second book the blue dark plains. Book 3, the reigns of Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius and Tarquinius Superbus, establishment of the Republic. 150 Jupiter's omen to Priscus on his way to Rome, Nonius, Leavum. The old critics believe this word to take its meaning as it were from levere. Ennius in the third book of Annals the All-Glorious sent down one day from the sky a favorable sign. 151-2 The omen, probus, on anima in Virgilius _632, air is here taken, by inductive reasoning, to mean winds. In proof of this we have taken an example of Ennius from the third book of the Annals. And there came flying on thick-set wings an eagle, battling with the breeze which the Greek nation calls in its tongue air. 153 Tanaquil, accepts the omen as favorable, Scholiast, Leava, prosperous, as Ennius says on the left hand and duly taken as good. 154 The death of Ancus Marcius, Festus, sos now and then writers put it for suos. Ennius after good Ancus quitted the light with his eyes. 155 Tarquinius Priscus is made king, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 11/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Festus, solemn, earth. Ennius in the third book gave to Tarquinius both sway and soil of the kingdom. 156 War of Priscus with the Latins, or Etruscans, Festus, sos for Eos. Ennius in the third book the clans of might and wealth which are around them. 157 Tanaquil dex dead Priscus, Servius, on and they wash and anoint his body in the chill of death in Virgilius N_6219, a line from Ennius, who says the good woman washed and anointed Tarquinius' body. 158 The funeral of Priscus, Festus, Prodinant, the same as Prodiant. The servants moved on, then beamed bright lights. 159 The reign of Servius Tullius, wars with Etruria, Macrobius, we must notice that he used even qua noctu. And this he put in the seventh book of the Annals, in the third book of which he wrote the same sort of thing more clearly. On this night all Etruria's fate will hang by a thread. 160-61 A battle in Servius Etruscan wars, Macrobius, the unruly husbandman engage with javelins on all sides. Virgilius, N_7520. Ennius in the third book after they were tired out from standing and spattering each other with loop-handled lances, they engaged with javelins on all sides. 162 Tarquinius Superbus. Lucretia outraged lies on a roof, Macrobius, Atlas whirls on his shoulder the sky dotted with blazing stars. Virgilius, N_4482. She looked up at the sky dotted with shining stars. 163 L. Lucretia prepares for death. Gellius, we used to investigate the question whether super esse in the archaic writers was a term used for remain and be lacking for the completion of a thing. We find in the third book of Ennius Annals this line: then she says that for herself one labor still waits over, super esse, is left and remains undone. This being the meaning, it must be spoken as two words. Book 4, The Early Republic, probably to the Gallic invasion of 390 BC. L 164 L. The siege of Anxur by the Romans. Macrobius, they strain with all their might and main. Virgilius, N_12:552. Ennius in the fourth book: the Romans on their ladders strain with all their might and main. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 12/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, 165 L. Anxur is stormed, 406 BC. Paulus, the town which is now spoken of as Terracina, belonging to the Volscian tribe, used to be called Anxur, as Ennius' words show. The wretched Volscians lost Anxur. 166 L. Eclipse of the Sun, 21st of June, 400 BC. Cicero, on the true cause of solar eclipses. In later times this did not escape the notice even of our Ennius, who writes that, about 350 years after the foundation of Rome, on June's 5th day the moon blocked out the sun in darkness. Book V, Samnite Wars and the Rise of Pyrrhus, to BC 295 L 167 L. A single combat, Manlius and a Gaul. Festus, Acasus. Ennius used it for Acacio. In the fifth book vexation drives him on, the chance holds him to it, the fact helps him. 168 L. Defense of Fregellae against the Romans. Nonius, Ansati, missiles with loop handles. They send down loop-handled lances from the towers. 169 L. Appeal of women at Fregellae at its capture, 313 BC. Priscianus, Miserio was used by the oldest writers. They caused even the enemy to have pity on them, shedding tears. 170 L. A battle between the Romans and the Samnites. Acro, at one time the Romans fought with Samnite enemies until nightfall, whence Ennius also says the dead of night rested from them a drawn battle. 171 L. The river Liris at Interamna Larinas. Macrobius, it is not inelegant to put agmen in the sense of a certain actus and ductus. For example, Thebris flows with gentle train. Virgilius, N_2782. Indeed it is also an antique usage, for Ennius in the fifth book says because the river flows with gentle train through the pleasant town. 172 L. Rise of Pyrrhus, Nonius, Stirps. Ennius has it in the masculine in the fifth book of the Annals by name Burrus, a man they say of highest stock. Book 6, The War with Pyrrhus, 281 to 271 BC. L 173 L. Prologue, Servius, on unroll this great war from end to end, in Virgilius N_9528, that is. Tell not only the beginnings, but also he conclusions of these wars, for by ori is meant extremities. An augmenter of Servius adds, it is further an expression of Ennius. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 13/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, who can unroll this great war from end to end. 174 to 6 L. Pyrrhus receives an oracle of Apollo. Cicero, why should I take Herodotus to be more truthful than Ennius? Surely he was quite as capable of inventing stories about Croesus as Ennius was about Pyrrhus. For who is there who could believe that Apollo's oracle gave this answer to Pyrrhus? I say that you, O man sprung from Aeacus, the Romans can defeat. In the first place, Latin is a tongue in which Apollo never spoke. Again, that particular reply is not known among the Greeks, and moreover, in the time of Pyrrhus, Apollo had already ceased to make verses, and lastly, although it has always held good, as we find in Ennius, that tribe of blockheads, stock of Aeacus, are war strong more than wisdom strong still, Pyrrhus would have had the sense to see that the double meaning of the line "you the Romans," defeat applied equally to himself and to the Romans. 177 L. Pyrrhus stormy crossing to Italy, his ship, Valla, Slataria. Probus expounds, alluring. Aeneas and a better ship than such as carries foreign fripperies. 178 L. Pyrrhus was at first welcome in Tarentum, 281 BC, Festus, Nervous, swift and active. Aeneas in the 6th book, a man of deeds they found him, a Greek son of a Greek father, and a very king. 179 L. But he showed himself a stern master, Festus, sumacy is a term which was applied to murmurers. Aeneas in the 6th book. Within they grumbled in secret. 180 L. A sudden raid near Tarentum by Lucius Aemilius Barbula. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_7625, through the dust the horsemen raged, all cried for weapons. He harried the bleeding sheep, all cried for weapons. 181-5 L. Preparations for burning the dead after the Battle of Heraclea, 280 BC, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_6179, they went into an old forest, deep dens of the wild, forward fell pitch pines, clattered holms under hatchet blows, clattered beams of ash trees against wedges, splitting oak wood too they cleft, and rolled along lofty rowans of the mountains. Aeneas in the 6th book. Then strode they through deep thicket woods and hewed with hatchets, mighty oaks they overturned, down crashed the holm and the ash was shattered, felled was the stately fir, they wrenched right down the lofty pines, and all the thicket wood of leafy forest rang and roared and rustled. 186-93 L. Pyrrhus replies to Fabricius, who came to ransom Roman prisoners, Cicero, and of Pyrrhus too there is that illustrious speech on the restoration of prisoners. Gold for myself I ask not, no, to me ye shall not pay a price. Not bartering war but waging war, not with gold but with iron, thus let us of both sides make trial for our lives. To see what fortune may bring, whether it be you or I she wishes to be king, let it be by bravery that we make the test. And withal hear this word of mine, of those warriors to whose bravery war's fortune has been kind, to the freedom of those same have I too planned to be kind. I give them to you, take them home, and with them I give you the blessing of the great gods. 194-5 L. Appius Claudius protests against any acceptance of Cinna's offers, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 14/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Cicero, when Appius Claudius was in old age it happened that he was also blind, nevertheless, when the opinion of the Senate was inclined towards peace and alliance with Pyrrhus he did not hesitate to utter those famous thoughts which Ennius set forth in poetry: whither on your road have senseless turned your senses, which hitherto were wont to stand upright. 196 L. Donatus, on in animo parere in Terentius form _5.4, the addition of animo is graceful. Ennius in the 6th book. But wherefore do I grieve now in my heart? 197 L. Cinna's reports to Pyrrhus his failure at Rome, Vero, in a passage of Ennius the spokesman came back without a peace, and brought the news to the king. Spokesman is a term derived from speech. 198-9 L. The courage of the Romans. Scholiast, on here the conqueror towering in pride of soul in Virgilius N_5473, Ennius in the 6th book. Or they mount high in pride, and the rough beginnings of war they spurn. 200-2 L. The battle of Osculum, Decius Mus devotes himself to the Demenes, Nonius, prognaritor, actively, valiantly and steadfastly. You gods, hear this my prayer a little while, as from my body I breathe my last for the Roman people's sake, knowingly and steadfastly, in arms and in battle. 203 L. Pyrrhus Mahouts cut the traces of the Roman chariot horses. Festus, Cetai is a term applied by poets sometimes to women of good looks, sometimes to women who are of good accomplishments. Ennius in the sixth book The skilled driver the beasts. 204 L Operations of Pyrrhus against the Carthaginians in Sicily, 277 to 276 BC, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_8596, the four-footed beat of the hoofs shook the crumbling plain. Ennius in the sixth book The Numidians went scouting, their hoofs shook the whole ground. 205 L The Battle of Beneventum, Pyrrhus moves to attack the Roman camp by night. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_2250, meanwhile round rolls the sky and night sets in from the ocean. Ennius in the sixth book Meanwhile the sky rolls round with its vast constellations. 206 L And dawn reveals his approach, Achilles Tatius, he scanned the white ether Catullus, 63 feet 40 inches. Ennius on the sun, in the sixth book. When darkness was cast away and the day was first whitening 207 to 8 L A soliloquy of Jupiter, during the Battle of Beneventum, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 15/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 1, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_10:2, and the father of the gods and king of men called a council. Ennius in the sixth book Then with all his heart the father of the gods and king of men spoke forth. 209 L Triumph or Death, 270, of Mennius Curius Dentatus, Cicero, from such a life, i.e. of a statesman, men of the highest rank are honored, as for example Mennius Curius whom none could overcome with iron or gold. Following lines, 210 to 426, rightward arrow Attalus homepage 28.12.17 Any comments? www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews1.html 16/16 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Ennius, Annals, Fragments, Book 7-16 This translation is by E.H. Warmington, 1935, with a few changes. See Key to Translations for an explanation of the format. The suggested context for each fragment, shown in red, is often just a conjecture. Click on the L symbols after the line numbers to go to the Latin text of the lines. The links to passages from other Latin authors will display the Latin text of these passages. Leftward arrow Previous lines, 1 to 209, Book 7, Events leading to the Second Punic War L 210 to 27 L Prologue, Gellius. There is a very clever and graphic description and definition by Ennius in the seventh book of the Annals, in a sketch of Geminus Servilius, a man of noble birth, of what temper and cheerfulness and modesty, it is seemly a man should show who is a friend of another his superior in birth and fortune. So saying he called to one with whom he shared willingly and cheerfully and right. Often his table, his talks and his affairs, when, tired out, he had spent long hours of the day in managing the greatest affairs, by counsel given in the wide forum and sacred Senate house, one to whom carefree he would often speak out boldly matters great and small, and joke the while, and blurt out words good and bad to say, if so he wished at all, and store them in loyal keeping, one with whom he could share many a pleasure and many a joy both openly and secretly, whose nature no thought of mind led to do a bad deed lightly or with wrong intent, a learned, trusty, agreeable man and a fine talker, content with his own, happy and shrewd, one who spoke the right thing at the right time, and obliging, of few words, keeping many old-time ways of which a bygone age long buried is the maker, and manners old and new, keeping also to the modes of many a one of our elders, and the laws too of gods and men, one who could prudently speak out hearsay or keep it to himself. Him did Servilius, in the midst of battles, thus address. They say that Lucius Aelius Stilo used to state that Quintus Ennius wrote this about none other than himself, and that the passage given here is a picture of the manners and temper of Quintus Ennius himself. 228 L Prologue continued. Festus, quinum for quer and cur. For why has your intent been turned by my words? 229 to 30 L Ennius alludes to his tale of his dream in the first book. Festus, SAS. In the 7th book of the same poet it must be confessed that is meant when he says, nor has any man seen in his dreams wisdom, a name we give to knowledge, before he has begun to learn her secrets. 231-2L The First Punic War, Navius and others have already sung about it, Cicero. Nevertheless, the Punic War of this poet Navius, whom Ennius counts among the seers and fauns, gives delight as though it were a work of Myron. I grant you, to be sure, that Ennius is the more perfect poet, as he certainly is, but if he really scorned Navius, as he pretends, he would not, in working through all our wars, have left undone the famous First Punic War, a most bitter one. But in his own words he tells us why he does it. He says www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 17th April 1st, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, others have written of the matter in verses, and nobly indeed they wrote, even though they did it in less finished fashion than you did, nor indeed ought it to appear otherwise to you who took many points from Navius, if you confess it, or if you deny it, filched them. 232-4L Cicero. Well, our old verses, where are they? In his own words he speaks of himself, nor lies in his boasting, which once upon a time the fauns and seers used to sing, when no one had surmounted the rough rocks of the Muses, nor was anyone mindful of style before this man. 235L Cicero. Therefore, since it was allowed to Ennius, when he scorned the old poetry, to say in verses which once upon a time the fauns and seers used to sing, must I be forbidden to speak of archaic writers in the same fashion? Especially since I am not going to say before me as he does, nor what follows we have dared to unfold. 236L The Origins of Carthage. The Carthaginian stock, the worship of Moloch, Probus, on that he may sleep on shall die of Sarah in Virgilius George _2506, by shall die of Sarah he wishes us to understand Tyrian purple. For that Tyre was called Sarah we are informed by Homer. Ennius also follows him as an authority when he says Phoenicians sprung from Sarah. 237L Festus, Puli is a word derived in a diminutive form from Puri. Thus Ennius says Phoenicians accustomed to offer up to the gods their own little sons. 238L Appius Claudius Caudex enters Sicily, 264 BC, Cicero. History means public events remote from the recollection of our own age, such as Appius proclaimed war against the Carthaginians. 239-40L Events between the First and Second Punic Wars. Rome obtains Corsica and Sardinia, Servius Octus, by Box Virgilius George _2449 meant the wood and not the tree, although in using the neuter gender he could have meant even the tree after the example of Ennius, for that poet has it thus in the 7th book, and tapering cypresses with notched leaves, and the box too, with bitter body, stand straight. 241L Carisius, Phris. Female gender because it is thus inflected by Ennius in the 7th book of the Annals. The leaves turn ruddy. 242-3L Rome obtains Sardinia, 238 BC, Nonius, rumor, favor, aid. The Roman army, cheered on by the crowd, attacked the ruins, and soon made away with the dwellings. 244L War with the Illyrian pirates, 230-228 BC. Festus, SOS for EOS. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 2/17 April 1st, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, while they were minded to startle them with threats, therewith they encouraged them. 245-6L Advance of the Roman fleet under C. N. Fulvius and L. Postumius, Festus, Tonsa. By this word Ennius, when he says in the 7th book lean ye right backward and beat ye your breasts with the trimmers, means an oar, because as it were tonditer, it is trimmed, with a knife, again backward they reach, then again pull the trimmers to their breasts. 247 LAC Fight, Illyrians hard pressed, Festus, Nair. Cornificius states that this word is derived from navis. The one wishes to float in flight, the other is ready to fight. 248 An Illyrian ship is driven ashore, Priscianus, Mulgeo likewise takes Mulci for its perfect tense. Hither the sea had gently washed a ship buffeted by the billows. 249 The Illyrians resist stoutly, Paulus, Cybina, a name given by the Illyrians to a javelin resembling a hunting spear. Ennius the Illyrian stood fast and stabbed with curving knives and hunting spears. 250 War of the Boy and other Cisalpine and Transalpine Celts against Rome, Nonius, Gracilentum for Gracilis. They beat out handy swords like slender thread. 251 to 2 The Gauls near Clusium, 225 BC, terror at Rome, Macrobius. On that night the Gauls with stealth attacked the wall tops of the citadel in the sleep time, and on a sudden brought bloodshed on the sentinels. In this passage we must notice that Ennius not only used noctu and concubia but also qua noctu. He puts this expression in the 7th book of the Annals. 253 Defeat of the Gauls at Telamon, 225 BC, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_12 565, let there be no delay to my commands. Jupiter stands on our side. Ennius in the 7th book not always does Jupiter upset your plans, now he stands on our side. 254 Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_10 284, fortune favors the daring. Ennius in the 7th book to men of fortitude is fortune granted. 255 The Via Flaminia, 220 BC, and Second Illyrian War, 219 BC, Priscianus, but Nar has kept thee along even in oblique cases. He built blowholes by Nar's sulphurous waters. Property is 3.3 feet 8 inches, and he sang, of the royal trophies carried by Emilius' ship. 256 to 7 Hannibal advances from Carthageo Nova, 218 BC, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 317 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Servius Octus, here by Equitum Virgilius means equum. Ennius in the 7th book of the Annals at last with mighty rush the horsemen at a four-footed gallop and the elephants to hurl themselves onwards. Cicero, our poet Ennius was a dear friend of the elder Africanus, and that is why a marble statue of him, it is thought, was set up in the tomb of the Scipios. But his verses of praise are surely an adornment not only for him who is praised but also for the name of the Roman people. Cato, ancestor of Cato here, is extolled to the skies, this carries with it great honor for the history of the Roman people. In short, all those great names, the Maximi, Marcelli, Fulii, are honored by praise which is shared by all of us. Hence it was that he who had done all this, a native of Rudii, was received by our ancestors into their citizenship. Book 8, the Second Punic War up to the departure of Scipio for Africa L 258 to 9 L outbreak of discord, Horatius sat _1.460, you would not still find the limbs of a dismembered poet as you would if you were to break up the following after foul discord broke open the ironclad doors and doorposts of war. Porphyrio on this passage, the sense is, if you analyze my verses or Lucilius, you will not find the same sort of limbs as you would in Ennius' verses, which are to be sure composed with mighty inspiration, with the use of a loftier diction as these are, after 260 to 1 L probus, air surely is the thing which gives us supplies of the breath of life. Spiritus is the name given to it by Ennius also in the Annals Discord, of hellish body daughter bred, woman of war in warrior's cloak, for whom water and fire and breath and heavy earth are equal. 262 to 8 L the people in time of war, Gellius says, ex ire manum concertum are words drawn from ancient cases at law. Ennius used these words. Then I myself recited from memory these lines from the 8th book of the Annals. When news of battles is proclaimed, away from view is wisdom thrust, with violence is action done, scorned is the speaker of good counsel, dear is the rude warrior. Not with learned speeches do men strive, but with evil speaking fall foul one of another, brewing unfriendliness. They rush to make joint seizure, not by law, rather by the sword do they seek a due return and aim at the first place, and move on with pack and press. 269 Rome thinks lightly of the Carthaginians, Priscianus, Dido, Didymus. In the 8th book Phoenicians sprung from Dido. 270 Gellius, Quintus Ennius does not appear to have spoken of the Carthaginians as petticoated lads without scorn. 271 The Romans were unaware of Hannibal's character. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 4/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Eckhart, over a passage of Orosius, in a Codex Sangallensis, referring to Hamilcar Rhodinus, Ennius has what kind of man he was in council, and how great his prowess in arms, 272-3 L. Eckhart. Over another passage of Orosius, in the same codex, referring to Hannibal, on Hannibal Ennius has but not such a double-faced foe was Burrus sprung from Aeacus. Propertius 3.39-10, and he sang, of Fabius' delays that were fraught with victory, and of the ill-starred fight of Cannae, and how the gods were turned to hear our heartfelt prayers. 274 L. Paulus, on the eve of the battle of Cannae, urges Varro not to accept battle, Nonius, Precox and Precoca. Time is unripe for fighting. 275 L. Fears of Paulus, Diomedes, in the old writers we notice that Abnio is used. I refuse to join issue, I fear ruin for my legions. 276-7 L. Hannibal to his troops on the occasion of the Battle of Cannae, BC 216, Cicero, and further our renowned and greatest poet did not wish that famous encouragement to be Hannibal's any more than one common to all commanders: he who will strike a blow at the enemy, hear me. He will be a Carthaginian, whatever his name will be, whatever his country. 278 L. The battle. The position of the sun favors both sides, festus, obstipum, slanting. To grow much greater because of the slanting sunlight. 279 L. But the wind raised dust clouds which hindered the Romans, Nonius, pulvis in the feminine gender, and just then a huge dust cloud was seen to reach the sky. 280 L. The infantry engagement, Precian, denso inflected as from denso. The bristling spears of the warriors crowded thick upon the plain. 281 L. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_12-84, and a shower of iron comes thick. Ennius in the 8th book the line of lancers scattered its lances, came a shower of iron. 282 L. Attack of the Numidians, Romans are mutilated, Paulus, men are called suppomati hamstrung whose upper thighs are cut through in the manner of pigs' haunches. Ennius the pony hamstrung them, wicked haughty foes. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 5/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. 283 L. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Hasdrubal sends the Numidians in pursuit of the Romans. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_8596, the four-footed beat of the hoofs shook the crumbling plain. Ennius in the 8th book they gave chase, with mightiest clatter their hoofs shook the ground. 284-6 L. The senators prevent panic at Rome. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_11-425, many a day and change of work in ever-varying life have brought back countless men to better state, and fortune, her I now here now there, has had the laugh and set men anew on foundation firm. Ennius in the 8th book many things does one day bring about in war and many fortunes through chance sink low again. In no wise has fortune followed any man all his days. 287 L. The 4th consulship of Fabius, 214 BC, Nonius, Quarchum and Quarto. Ennius rightly has Quarchum in Quintus the father was made consul for the 4th time. 288 L. During the siege of Capua, Hannibal marches on Rome, 211 BC. Paulus, ob for ad, for example Ennius he began by night to lead his hosts against Rome. property is 3.3 feet 11 inches, and he sang how our Lares put Hannibal to flight from their Roman home. 289 L. Capua is stormed, 211 BC, Festus says, Oscans. Varius states that the people we call by this name were formerly called the Opsians, his witness being Ennius, since he says the Opscan gives battle from the wall. 290 L. Tale of Sepius Loisus and others of Capua, Paulus, Medix is among the Oscans the name of a magistrate. Ennius there the chief magistrate was made prisoner, the other was put to death. 291 L. Hymn of Livius Andronicus, to Juno, Scholiast, Ennius says in the 8th book the flute composed a song of music. 292 L. Juno begins to favor the Romans, Priscianus, authors are wont to vary their figures, for example, Ennius Saturn's daughter, mighty among goddesses, dearest of those that dwell in heaven. 293 L. Servius, she will change her counsels for the better. Virgilius, N_1281 because in the Second Punic War, according to Ennius Juno was appeased and began to show the Romans her goodwill. Servius, in Ennius, Jupiter is introduced as promising the Romans that Carthage shall be overthrown. 294 L. The drunken Gauls at the Battle of the Metaurus, 207 BC, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 6/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_2265, they rushed on the city, which was buried in sleep and wine. Ennius in the 8th book and now the enemy, mastered by wine and buried in sleep, 295 L. Festus, Acasus. For Acacio. But when the occasion or the time smothered their daring, 296 L. Triumphant return of the two consuls, Servius Octus, Mactus. Even the form Mactatus was used for this, for example, Ennius thence returned Livius magnified with a great triumph. 297-9 L. New fleet of Scipio Africanus, consul, 205, in training. Nonius, Portisculus is, in its proper sense, the term for the time-beater of a ship's oarsman, that is to say, the man who holds the staff for which the term Portisculus is used. By means of this he times the rhythm and lay to that, holding the oar forward, they should obey and watch when the boatswain began to give them the signal. Book 9, Scipio's Campaigns in Africa, Peace, 201 BC L 300-5 L M. Cornelius and P. Sempronius Consuls, 204 BC, Cicero. The following is a passage in Ennius' work, in the 9th book, I think, of the Annals. Then Marcus Cornelius Cethegus, son of Marcus, an orator whose mouth spoke pleasant speech, is put in as a colleague to Tuditanus. He calls him an orator and also grants him pleasantness of speech, but the greatest stroke in praise of his eloquence is surely this. By those fellow countrymen who were then alive and had their being, he was once upon a time called the choice flower of the people. Well said indeed. For, as the glory of a man is his natural talents, so the luster of those very talents is eloquence, and a man surpassing in eloquence was admirably called by the men of that time flower of the people and the marrow of persuasion. This Cethegus was consul with Publius Tuditanus in the Second Punic War, and Marcus Cato was a quaestor in their consulship, in round numbers only 150 years before my own consulship, and were this fact not known through the testimony of Ennius alone, antiquity would have buried this very Cethegus, as maybe it has buried many others, in oblivion. 306 L. Scipio A. Campaigns in Africa. Festus, metonymia when the meaning of a word contains exactly the contents of its equivalent, for example, Ennius when he says trembled Africa, land rough and rude, with a terrible tumult. 307 L. Battle of Zama. 202 BC, Nonius, luctant for luctanter. The soldiers struggled with sturdy strength. 308 L. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 7/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2. Nonius, pulvis, of the feminine gender. Brown dust flies aloft 309 L. Nonius, debil, the same as debilis a feeble fellow 310 to 11 L. Priscinus, verbs ending in geo. Just as the Cyclops' belly once swelled high, stretched tight with human flesh 312 L. The spoils won after the battle of Zama, Servius, undentum, the same as abundantum. Ennius in the 9th book of the Annals the army billowed in booty. 313 to 14 L. Hannibal's defeat. Nonius, famul, the same as famulus. Fortune on a sudden casts down the highest mortal from the height of his sway, to become the lowliest thrall. 315 L. Scipio to Hannibal. Priscinus, Ennius, in the 9th book puts frux, which is an adjective, for frugi homo. But to what end do I speak so? No sooner said than done, so acts your man of worth. 316 L. Terms of peace imposed in Carthage, 201 BC, Varro says, Militis stipendia, soldiers' pay, is a term used because they paid it as a stips, small coins in piles. This is the derivation of stipendia as used by Ennius among others. The pony paid payments of money. 317 L. Funeral of the slain. Macrobius, Virgilius inserted into his work even Greek words following the daring of ancient authors. Ennius in the 9th book twice 6 lighted lamps 318 to 19 L. Italy after the war. The soldiers must return to the soil, Nonius, polit iones, diligent cultivations of fields. He will take toothed rakes for to dress the fields. 320 to 21 L. Let Rome's liberty be maintained, Nonius, perpetua si, may it be perpetual, eternal, and liberty, that it may last forever. And all that I may have done. Book X, War with Macedonia up to the settlement after the Battle of Cynocephaly. L. 322 to 3 L. Prologue, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 8/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Gellius, in Psyche has the sense of go on to tell, and this therefore is the form used by Ennius in these verses. Go on to tell what each commander of the Romans wrought with his troops in war with King Philippus. But the other insisted that we must trust Velius Longus, who wrote that in Ennius we should read not in Psyche but in Cis. 324 L. First Macedonian War, expedition of Valerius Laevinus, 214, Priscinus, the oldest writers used to say also Campso, Campses, bend. Ennius in the 10th book they doubled locate. 325 L. Second Macedonian War, 200 to 196 BC Consuls of 200, Isidorus, zeugma is a period when more than one idea is completed by one verb. For example, Greece was given by lot to Sulpicius, Gaul to Cotta. 326 L. Sextus Aelius Paetus, consul with Flamininus, 198, Cicero, a man uncommonly well-wit, shrewd Sextus Aelius, who was a man of more than common wit and shrewd, and called such by Ennius not because he used to search for things which he could never discover, but because he used to give such answers as freed from anxiety and trouble those who had asked him questions. 327 to 9 L. A shepherd, sent to guide the Romans, asks Flamininus, Cicero, O Titus, if it is I can help you in anything and lighten you of the worry which, stubborn in your breast, now sears and haunts you, will there be any reward? 330 to 1 L. Charops assures Flamininus that the shepherd is trustworthy. Cicero continues, for I may be allowed to address to you, Atticus, the same verses as those in which Flamininus is addressed by that man not blessed with wealth but full of loyalty, although I know for certain it is not, like Flamininus, that you are careworn, Titus, thus day and night. 332 L. The night march of Flamininus, guided by the shepherd, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, Atlas on his shoulder turns the heaven dotted with blazing stars N_4482. Ennius in the 10th book and then the night came on, dotted with blazing stars 333 to 5 L. The Battle of Cynocephaly, 197 BC, Anxiety of Flamininus, Servius Octus, mustn't also means they murmur. He was watching the mettle of his army, waiting to see if they would grumble, saying what rest will there be at last from our fighting, or end to our hard toil. 336 Speech of Flamininus before the battle, Diomedes. Some old writers used the form horitator. The commander cheers and cheers them on horitator being as it were in iterative form. www.adaluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 9/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, 337-8 The battle, special troop of Philip, Priscianus, the oldest writers did not always elide. Then he led some 8,000 warriors, wearing badges, chosen men, strong to bear war well. 339-41 Impatience of Flamininus' army. Festus, nictet is a term used of a dog gently whimpering as he scents the tracks of wild animals. And just as sometimes a fleet hunting dog, tied up by a chain, is wont to do if by chance her keen-scented nostril has caught scent of wild quarry, she lifts her voice in a whimper and straightway loudly gives tongue. 342 Fighting on rough ground, Diomedes, Pincet, according to the third conjugation. They bruise their knees on the ground. 343-4 Demetrius, younger son of Philip, taken by Rome as a hostage, the parting with Philip, Nonius, passum, stretched out, spread open, whence we also say passus, step, because the feet spread open, as they step apart, each from the other. Sick at heart and with hands flung wide, the father. By passus as applied to pomus he means open wide and outstretched. 345 Lament of Philip on the exile of Demetrius, Donatus, on indeed the columen of his household in Terentius form _2.157, columen in the sense of summit or columen in the sense of pillar. They have now overturned and moved away the pillar of the realm. Book 11, from 196 BC to the opening of the war with Antiochus, Cato in Spain L346 Greece after Philip's defeat, Festus, that quip means quidni Ennius is a witness in the 11th book surely are all kings wont in times of good fortune. 347-8 Flamininus points to the relation of the Romans to the Greeks, Festus, sos for eos. They maintain that the Greeks, men are wont to speak of them as grey, language through long. 349-50 Brachillas, warns the Greeks against the power of Rome, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, when captured, could they be in truth captured? No. And did Troy burn her warriors? No. And _7-95 Ennius, when he was speaking about Pergama in the 11th book, wrote Troy's citadel, which on the plains of Dardanus could not perish or be captive when captured or when burnt become ashes. 351 A place in Greece, Festus, rocks, of these there are two kinds, of which one is natural stone jutting out into the sea. A cliff deep falling, covered by mighty crags. www.adaluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 10/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. 352 Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Cato on the one-time modesty of women, Nonius, lacked in the nominative case, and at once she blushed like milk and crimson mingled. 353 He contrasts the luxury of his own day, Nonius, peniculamentum, a term which old writers use for part of a dress. Skirts hang low down to every little foot. 354-5 He curses the moderns, Nonius, crux of the masculine gender, says he, give them destruction, Jupiter, with utter hell. 356 Cato in Spain, 195 BC, battle with the rebels, Priscianus, Sono goes on both sonas and sonis. Then the round shields resounded, and the iron spear points whizzed, 357 Priscianus, from strido some have conjugated stridi and the spear, shot into his breast, whizzed as it sped through. 358 La Spanish chief parleys with the Roman embassy. Caricius, Hispan is a form used by Ennius in a book of the Annals. Report you, it is the Spanish that I speak, and not the Roman tongue. 359 Unplaced fragment, Paulus, remora means to search thoroughly, as it were in the very roomy crannies. Festus. Ennius, in the 11th book both parties pride. Book 12. L 360-2 A reminiscence of Fabius Maximus Cunctator, Cicero, how much better was the behavior of Quintus Maximus, of whom Ennius says one man by his delays restored the state, here say he would not put before our safety, hence to this day the warrior's glory shines, in after time, and all the more for that. 363-5 L rejoicing after victory. Priscianus, Acer and Alicer and Celeber and Celeber are found inflected in both er and is in both genders. Yes, all those victors, every single soul, contented from the bottom of their hearts, sleep on a sudden, over all the plain, most soft thrilled tingling through them, tended well by wine. Gellius, Marcus Varro has recorded that Ennius, in his 67th year, wrote the 12th book of the Annals, and that Ennius himself mentions this very fact in the same book. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 11/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Book 13, The Early Stages of the War with Antiochus L 366-8 L Antiochus suspects Hannibal, 193 BC, Gellius, Ennius used cor, said Caecilius, as he did many other similar nouns, in the masculine gender, for in the 13th book of Annals he wrote quem cor. He then added 2 lines of Ennius. Antiochus, king of Asia, is the speaker of these words. But what Ennius meant was something different by far. For there are 3 lines, not 2, which go to complete the sentence of Ennius. Of these Caecilius overlooked the 3rd, while Hannibal with bold breast exhorts me not to make war, he whom my heart believed to be a most mighty counselor, yet one devoted in war's ruggedness. 369 L reminiscence of Xerxes crossing from Asia to Europe, 480 BC, Varro, the phrase as it were the Hellespont and its barriers comes from the fact that Xerxes at one time made a barrier in that region. 4. As Ennius says, and he stretched a bridge over deep Hellespont. 370 L Antiochus laments his defeat at Thermopylae in 191 BC by Glabrio, Gellius. No one on that occasion remembered that the verb verent was used by Ennius in the 13th book of the Annals. Do seers, in all their life's course, tell much of truth? 371 L Siege of Pergamum by Seleucus IV in 190 BC. Servius Octus, Ferri. The old writers used it even in the sense of vel. Ennius the matrons crowded the walls, eager to look on. Book 14, The End of the War, and the Settlement of Asia after the Battle of Magnesia L 372-3 L Victory of Aemilius Regalis at Myonissus, Departure of the Roman Fleet, Gellius, you made me understand those very charming words from Ennius' 14th book of Annals. Forthwith they gently swept a sea of yellow marble, green foamed the brine beaten by the thronging ships. 374 L The rapid advance, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, smooth glides the well-greased firwood through the waters. N_891 Ennius in the 14th book smooth glided the well-greased keel and schemed over the waves with a rush. 375-6 L They sight the enemy near Myonissus, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, looking down on the sail-fluttering sea. N_1224 Ennius in the 14th book when they saw far off the enemy coming towards them with the breeze in sail-fluttering ships. 377 L The Scipios cross the Hellespont, 190 BC, Priscianus. These same verbs are found, in the oldest writers, inflected according to the 3rd conjugation also. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 12/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, the broad beaches sound 378 to 9L speech before the Battle of Magnesia, 190 BC, Priscianus. Orier and morier are found to have been inflected by authors according to both the third and the fourth conjugation. Now is the day when glory most great shows itself to us, whether we live or die. 380L Beginning of the battle, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, then the battlefield, all iron, bristles with lances N_11601. Bristles is strange here. But Ennius too in the 14th book has on both sides the host bristles rough with javelins. But again earlier than all writers Homer said IL_13 the battle, man destroying, bristled with long spears. 381 to 2L Antiochus in his defeat, Priscianus, still, the oldest writers pronounced both long and short the penultimate syllable of the above-mentioned word, that is tutudi. He began to speak, O my countrymen, fortune who has thus bruised me, and I deserved it not, and has destroyed me in bitter war 383L Burning of the dead after the battle, Festus, ob instead of ad. All butchered, and burnt in the clear calm night. Book 15, The Aetolian War, the original conclusion of the Annals L384L The Siege of Ambracia by Fulvius Nobilior, 189 BC, Nonius, fully are wooden towers. They cleft the corner beams, floors and siege towers were built 385 to 6L Priscianus, Ennius in the 15th book of the Annals many were laid low by death with sword and stone in headlong fall within or without the walls. 387L Priscianus, Arcus, is found even in the feminine gender in old writers. They look up at the bows which are said by mortals. Macrobius, there are other passages in Virgilius, consisting of several lines, which Maro, with the alteration of a few words, transferred from the old poets to his own work. The passage about Pandarus and Bishes opening the gates N_9672 is taken from the 15th book of Ennius, who introduced the tale of how two Histrions during a siege burst out of the gate and caused a slaughter among the besieging enemy. 388 to 9L Ennius original ending to his annals, his old age, www.adelus.org/poetry/nnews2.html 13/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Cicero, for it is their own blemishes and their own sins that fools lay to the charge of old age, a thing which he, of whom I made mention just now, was not wont to do, Ennius just as a valiant steed, who has often won victories at the Olympic Games in the last lap, now at length, worn out by old age, takes rest, he is comparing his old age to that of a valiant and victorious horse. Book 16, from 188 BC to the end of the Istrian War L390L Prologue, Past Work, Growing Age, Festus, that quip means quidni Ennius is a witness. In the 16th book surely it is enough that the old-time wars of warriors were undertaken 391 L Nonius, Pagret. I am reluctant to take up the task, late in aging life. 392 L Gellius, dies instead of die. Lastly, that which the long age of my days has crushed. Plinius, Quintus Ennius had a particular admiration for Titus Aelius Teucer and his brother, and on their account added to his annals the 16th book. 393 to 4L A general remark on this period of Roman history. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_12 they strain with all their might and main, Ennius, in the 16th book kings throughout their kingship are in quest of statues and sepulchres, they build up a name and strain with all their might and main. 395 L censorship of M. Aemilius Lepidus and M. Fulvius Nobilior, 179 BC, Priscianos, Acer. Autumn follows on summer, after it comes keen winter. Cicero, but is it not true that our famous Marcus Lepidus, who was twice consul and also Pontifex Maximus, is praised, not only by the record of tradition but also in the written evidence of annals and by the greatest of our poets, because with his colleague Marcus Fulvius, a great enemy of his, on the day when he was made censor, he at once made a reconciliation in the campus. 396 An aging Roman. Festus, regimen for regimentum. First the aged man, tardy in his ruling, skilled in war. 397 The Istrian War, 178-7 BC. Festus, spicit is likewise used by archaic writers without a preposition prefixed. Ennius in the 16th book has spexit when King Ippulo spied them from the top of high crags. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 1417 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. 398 Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2. The Istrians keep watch over the Roman camp by the Lacus Timavus, Festus, obstipum, slanting. Slanting mountains standing in the way, whence rises up the night. 399 The Istrians are well prepared, Priscinus, frux derived from Phyrogamma omega. If by daylight, if at night, if soon, if now we be given success. 400 The Istrian plan of attack on the Romans, Festus, Quinto. When night shall fly girt up by constellations in her midst, 401-2 Dawn comes, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_3585, nor was there a clear and starlit heaven. Ennius had said before in his 16th book, meanwhile the torch dies out and pink trailing dawnlight covers the ocean. 403-4 The Romans on the watch, Servius Octus, reading Orfave in Virgilius, come close with the silence of worship. George_4230, in the 16th book Ennius here in ambush they keep watch, while some of them take rest, guarded by their swords, keeping a shut mouth under their shields. 405 The tribune Aelius reminds the consul, A Manlius Vulso, of his duty, Festus, Nivus swift and strenuous. It is the part of commanders who are men of deeds, to keep discipline. 406 Aelius says he will stand his ground, Festus, the same Ennius, when he says sapsa instead of ipsa nec alia, writes in the 16th book, in the place where my very duty displays itself and commands me. 407 The hopes of Aelius, Festus, the archaic writers used a plural spurs. I hope, if hopes can help at all. 408 Possibly from the consul's reply to Aelius, Festus, prodit, ruins. Not to ruin the state by hoping eagerly. 409-16 Aelius stands fast against violent attacks. Macrobius, Virgilius has certain passages which he is believed to have transferred from Homer, but I shall show that they are passages which were taken from authors of ours who, earlier than Virgilius, had transferred these passages from Homer to their own poetic works. Homer on a fierce fight fought by Ajax has IL_16102, but Ajax could no longer stand his ground, for distressed was he by spears. Yea, the will of Zeus overmastered him, the Trojans too who pelted him, dread was the rattle which his shining helmet thus pelted. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 1517 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, kept around his brows, for pelted was it again and again over its fair raw cheek pieces. Weary was he too in his shoulder, the left where he firm and constant held his motley shield, nor could they by lunging all around him with their javelins so dash him off. And ever was he gripped in cruel gasping, while sweat unquenched poured down off his limbs from every point, nor could he in any wise draw breath, but on all sides heaped was hurt on hurt. This passage Ennius in the 16th book transferred to the fight of the tribune C. Aelius, in the following lines: from all sides the javelins like a rainstorm showered in upon the tribune, and pierced his buckler, then jangled the embossment under spears, the helmets too with brassy clang, but not one of them, though strain they did from every side, could rend apart his body with the iron. Every time he shakes and breaks the waves of lances, sweat covers all his body, he is hard distressed, to breathe he has not a chance. The iron came flying as the Histrians cast the spears from their hands to harass him. By the use of this as an example, Virgilius, on the subject of Turnus hemmed in, has rendered the same passage with a more elegant grace N_9803. 417 L. The death of Elias. Macrobius, he fell forward upon the wound, his weapons dinned over him N_10488. Ennius in the 16th book he tumbled and at once his armor dinned over him. 418 L. The Istrians prevail, and feast in the Roman camp at the order of the king, Diomedes. Horatur was used for hortator. He orders and encourages them to break their fast. 419-20 L. The Romans recover their camp, King Ippulo, half drunk, escapes, Servius Octus, others take Velera to mean to move. Ennius then the king, full roused, pulled himself up. 421 L. The siege of Nisictum by C. Claudius Pulcher, 177 BC. Vero, there are many sounds which though belonging to animals have been used figuratively of men. Ennius transferred from the goat the clamour rolling skyward bleated through the air. 422 L. Festus, Vagar instead of Vigitus this clamour the besiegers with winged bleeding. 423 L. From scenes of battle, Priscianus, on Tutudi. Ennius in the 16th book the lance of sturdy metal punched through his right side. 424 L. Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, then a cold sweat came flowing down all my body N_3175. Ennius in the 16th book then sweat flowed from all his fear-filled body. 425-6 L. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 16/17 April 1, 22, 2:54 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 2, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, still the darting lance took away the helmet top N_12 492. Ennius in the 16th book still the lance flying at him carried away with it the badge. Following lines, 427-565, rightward arrow Attalus homepage 15.11.14 Any comments? www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews2.html 17/17 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, Ennius, Annals, Fragments, Books 17-18 and Unplaced Fragments. This translation is by E.H. Warmington, 1935, with a few changes. See Key to Translations for an explanation of the format. The suggested context for each fragment, shown in red, is often just a conjecture. The text of Ennius' poems can be found in Phi Latin texts, with slightly different numbering of the lines. The links to passages from other Latin authors will display the Latin text of these passages. Leftward arrow previous lines, 210-426, Book 17, from the end of the Istrian War to the defeat of P. Crassus at Callinicus L. 427 King Perseus fortifies the passes of Tempe, 171 BC. Festus, Specus in the feminine gender. Ennius then a hollow cavern opened widely inwards under the mountain. 428 Perseus watches Crassus from Mount Ossa. Priscianus, genitive even in as himself the leader of the way. 429 Defeat of P. Licinius Crassus in a cavalry battle at Callinicus, 171 BC, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius, the four-footed beat of the hoof shakes the crumbling plain N_8596. Ennius, in the 17th book the horsemen charged, and the beating of their hollow hoofs shook the ground. 430-32 The clash, Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_2416, as from time to time with a great whirlwind gales set against each other meet in conflict, the west wind and the south, and the east happy in his horses of the dawn. Ennius in the 17th book they rushed together as when the breath of the showery wind of the south and the wind of the north with his counterblasts strive to upheave billows on the mighty main. 433 Macrobius, quoting Virgilius N_11745, uproars to heaven a shout and the Latins, one and all. Ennius in the 17th book uproars to heaven the shout that rose from either side. 434-5 Slackness of discipline in the Roman army. Servius Octus, Mustn't here means murmurant, it is a term which is also used with a sense of not speaking. No, it is not meet that good warriors should mumble, warriors who, straining in the toil of battlefields, have given birth to deeds. 436-8 Unplaced fragments, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 13th April 1st, 22:3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, Nonius, long Gissera, to become long, or to be broken, nor do their firm bodies languish at all. The same poet when the sunny days shall make them lengthen long. Book 18, Further Events of the Year 171. L 439 Making a Camp, Nonius, the gruma is a certain measuring instrument, by means of this, when it is fixed in position, roads are built in a truly straight line. Ennius in the 18th book, for to mark out with the measuring rod, uses the phrase to level off the meeting place 440 the indecisive battle at Phalana. Gellius, but on the other hand Ennius again in the 18th book of Annals writes a tawny mist fulva not fulvo, not only because Homer IL_2446 says rho alpha beta alpha theta epsilon alpha nu but, I think, because he believed the former sounded to be more musical and pleasant. From Book 8 or 9. Phrases copied by Virgilius in the 5th book of the Aeneid 441 Festus, termo is, as used by Ennius, a Gricism, a good prompter before the boundary post at the limits is reached. 442 Isidorus, Selaces are what the Greeks call kapillamdata tau epsilon, that is, swift biremes or triremes fitted for the service of a fleet. Ennius has the cutter glided smoothly over the white of the waves on a greasy keel 443-4 Scholiast, on Virgilius even as when teams of 4 pour out from the barriers George_1512, barriers, doors. Ennius says when pouring from the barriers the chariots with a mighty clatter strive to move headlong, 445 Carisius, as in the case of a ship we can speak of a driver, so in the same way we can speak of a steersman in the case of a chariot, for example, and when the steersman has turned his horses with a mighty pull, 446 Festus, restat. Ennius is stated to use this word for distant when he says its rush not far off keeps steady in the course. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 13th April 1st, 22:3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, 447 Festus, termo is, as used by Ennius, a Gricism with giant speed it overruns the place where the boundary post is set. Other fragments of the Annals not assigned to any book L 448 The gods, Cicero, yes, men call upon him not only as Jupiter but also as Lord of the universe, and ruler of all things by his nod, and, as Ennius says Father of gods and men 449 Vero, Ennius calling upon the same God, says Father and Monarch of gods and men 450-51 Virgilius N_1254, the begetter of gods and men, with a gentle smile for her in his look, with which he calms the sky and the weather, gently kissed his daughter. Servius, on subridence, with a gentle smile. He represents Jupiter as happy and such as he is wont to be when he brings calm weather. Servius Octus, Ennius has here Jupiter smiled, and with the Almighty's smile, smiled clear and calm all weathers. 452-3 Servius Octus, Arcebit, kept off. It means also contains. Ennius who with bright thunderbolt encloses all things in a burst of sound, 454 Cicero, it was with reference to our system of augury that Ennius wrote then on the left, in weather clear and calm, he thundered a good omen. 455 Affairs of State. Priscianus, Celerissimus for Celerimus. Ennius in the Annals and then after most swiftest rumor had spread through the lands, 456 Servius, on Virgilius making decision with the sword N_12709, this reading is old and the true one. For he followed Ennius. Busied with great affairs they were making a decision. 457 Servius, on cum vomera in Virgilius George _2474, cum is redundant. Ennius from his own hallowed heart he poured forth speech, www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 3/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, that is, proprio pectori, for cum has no force here. 458-9 Carisius, in Mundo for Palam and in Ex Dito and Cito. Ennius whether it is life or death is now in readiness for you 460 Servius Octus, on strike strength into the winds in Virgilius N_169. Ennius by his words he struck wrath into the Romans 461 Cicero, you don't say so, Atticus. You, who praised the nice honor of my conduct dare you thus out of your own mouth? Says Ennius, ask me to give Scaptius some cavalry to collect his debts with? 462 Vero, Turi has two meanings, one derived from the idea of looking at, whence comes Ennius' use of it. What man, father or kinsman, will wish to look you all in the face? 463 Nonius, vultus, in the neuter. Ennius you and your faces will be ever turned away 464 to 6 Vero, many animal sounds have been used figuratively of human beings, of quite clear cases there is, for example, Ennius when his heart in his breast barks his wants and of less obvious cases there is for example. Ennius usage drawn from the calf, and the same poet's usage drawn from the cow clamorously mooing and also his usage drawn from the lion they put a stop to their roaring. 467 Augustine, just as Cicero himself declared, speaking not in Scipio's nor anyone else's words but in his own person at the beginning of his 5th book on the Republic, having first quoted the line of Ennius where that poet had written on manners and on men of olden time stands firm the Roman state. 468-9 Vero, with regard to this matter, only now could it be said, and not when Ennius wrote, that 700 years it is, a little more or less, since renowned Rome was founded by August Augury 470 Nonius, Saellum, in the masculine. Ennius brave are the Romans as the skies profound www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 4/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, 471-2 Porphyrio, on Horatius' words, it's worth your while, all you who wish no successful path for adulterers, to hear how they are burdened on all sides _1.237, he wittily perverts lines of Ennius to hear is worth your while, all you who wish the Roman state to tread a successful path and Latium to increase. 473 Servius, on Virgilius N_1127 whom, lacking not of valor, says, this is a line of Ennius. 474 Echehard, over a passage of Orosius, mentioning the punishment of Minutia, a Vestal virgin, Ennius since nothing more horrible could any law ever demand. 475 Nonius, Propages is a connected series drawn out without a break, or at great length. Ennius whence there might be crops and prolonging of life for us, 476 Priscianus, Nicatus is the proper term to use of a man killed by the sword, but Nectus of a man killed by some other violence. Ennius some a plague did kill, others of them fell in wars. 477 War. Cassiodorius, cum as a preposition must be written with a c, quum as an adverb of time meaning quando with a q for the sake of distinction, for example in Ennius when the commander sets forth with his hosts, 478 Nonius, metus, in the feminine. Ennius nor any fear holds them, trusting in their valor, they rest. 479 Festus, sultus means si vultus. Ennius open your eyelids, will you all, and leave behind the sleep in your hearts. 480 Lactantius, on and sleep fled away, his horn empty in Statius Theb _627, sleep is represented by painters so as to appear to pour out liquid sleep over slumberers from a horn. So Ennius has when the young warriors of Rome dry themselves from sleep. 481-2 Nonius, latrocinary to serve as a soldier for pay. Aeneas and the hired warriors began to talk among themselves of their fortunes. 483 www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 5 13th April 1st, 22, 3:01 a.m. Aeneas, translation of Fragments, 3, Nonius, Sagum. Masculine form. Aeneas therefore a thick cloak covers his back. 484 Festus, Aeneas. Still could one bring one stake, still could he defend. Suri are stakes, the diminutive is circuli. 485 Servius Octus, on Virgilius, not when conquered can they have done with the sword. N_11 307, Aeneas he who has conquered is not conqueror, unless the conquered one confesses it. Varro and the rest speak of the Trojans as unconquered because they were overthrown by trickery. They affirm that only those who surrender themselves are conquered. 486 Festus, superessit means supererit. Aeneas yes, so long as one man of Rome in his toga is left alive. 487 Varro, in a passage of Aeneas just then the shrill watchwords were making ready to give sound in a call. Cata means sharp, for this is the word used by the Sabines for a cutta. 488 Paulus, litness is so called on the ground that it is a witness of list strife. Aeneas thereupon the war horn poured forth sharp sounds. 489 Donatus, on with such faint spirit as that in Terentius, Aeneas the best youth of Rome with fine spirit. 490 Paulus, Crescentes, slender. Aeneas sword girt and slender round the waist. 491 Servius, on armed in iron in Virgilius N_9675, either well equipped with arms or, according to the statement of Asper, having hearts of iron, that is, thinking hard and bloody thoughts. This makes him follow Aeneas, who says gird round their hearts with broad swords. 492 Servius Octus, on in the midst of spears in Virgilius N_537, Aeneas has in the midst of lances and the light armed followed in the midst of lances. 493 www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 6 13th April 1st, 22, 3:01 a.m. Aeneas, translation of Fragments, 3, Paulus, Sicils, broad points of lances. Aeneas the skirmishers, holding broad cutting spears, advanced in a body. 494 Nonius, Phalarica, a very large javelin. Aeneas which comes sturdily, the fire spear was hurled. 495 Scholiast, on Lucan's house standards faced enemy standards, eagles were matched one with another, and spears threatened spears. 16-7, a line of Aeneas blunted back were spears that clashed against oncoming spears. 496 Servius Octus, on and with a spear stout as a beam he smote him praying many a prayer in Virgilius N_12-294, Aeneas and with a spear stout as a beam. 497 Paulus, runa means a kind of spear. Aeneas armed with spear, gave way runita, that is, having given battle. 498 Festus, spira is a term applied to the base of a pillar. But Aeneas gives the name to a multitude of men when he says coils wove he with his hosts. 499 to 500 Lactantius, on Statius. Then his chill mouth fell silent, the trumpet finished alone its tune. They've _1156, Aeneas and when his head was falling, the trumpet finished alone its tune, and even as the warrior did perish, a hoarse blare sped from the brass. 501 to 2 Servius, on Virgilius you, Larides, your severed right hand seeks, you, its master, and your fingers half alive lie twitching, and clench at the sword. N_10 396, the idea is Aeneas, thus on the plains gaped his head torn out from the neck, and his eyes half alive lay twitching, and longed to see the light. 503 Porphyrio, on Horatius do you see how Sarac stands white in deep snow? Carm _1.91, stet means is laden, as Ennius has it the plains stand thick with dust and Virgilius N_12 408, and now you see the sky stand thick with dust. 504 to 5 www.adaluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 7 13th April 1st, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, Servius Octus, on Virgilius he turned round his spear and struck into the hollow mountain's side N_181, Ennius for a heavy onset of death strikes into my side. 506 Caricius. Ennius also in a book of the Annals Bravo. The Latins were refreshed. 507 to 8 The Spanish War, thus since shouts were mingled with groans, and a clattering of swords struck upon the ear, the din confused the minds of the raw levies. As Ennius says here, upon foot pressed foot and weapons robbed, and warrior thronged. 509 The Spanish War, at this point, while our men were busied at the work, a number of our adversaries ran down from a higher level and by casting many spears wounded a number of our men who were unable to hold them back. As Ennius says here, now our men gave way a little while. 510 Servius Octus, on Virgilius, temera also means suddenly. Ennius, whither go you all so rashly? 511 Vero, in a passage of Ennius order was given to stand and delve into their bodies with spears. This word fossari in Ennius is derived from fodio, whence comes the word fossa. 512 Isidorus, Titarimus for very savage. Ennius foul elephants. 513 Servius, on goes a black column upon the plains in Virgilius N_4404, a half line of Ennius used of elephants. Axius used it earlier than Virgilius of Indians. 514 to 15 Priscianus, Tutudi. Ennius, in the annals and their sturdy strength cruel winter crushed here he has scanned the penultimate long. 516 Nonius, Lapides. This term can be used even in the feminine gender, for example, Ennius with so great a column were stones then upraised, this is after the manner of Homer, who used his word for stones in the feminine gender. www.adaluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 8 13th April 1st, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, 517 to 21 Macrobius. There is in Homer a description of a horse in flight, in these words IL_6506, even as when a stalled horse full fed at the manger breaks his tether and gallops clattering over the plain, being wont to bathe himself in a fair flowing river, glorying therein, high holds he his head, and round his shoulders floats his mane, and he trusting in his glory, swiftly do his limbs bring him to the haunts and pastures of Mares. From this Ennius derived the following: and then just as a horse which, full fattened from the stalls, bursts his tether in his high fettle, and away with breast uplifted bears himself over the rich grey-green meadows of the plain, meanwhile again and again he tosses his mane on high, and his breath born of his hot temper flings out white froth, and Virgilius, as when, tether burst, has fled his stalls N_11 492 and the rest. 522 Caricius, when Ennius says Celerissimus goes like the most swiftest cavalry, it is a barbarism. 523 Servius, on the enemy is here, high. With a great clamour the Teucrians betook themselves through all the gates N_937, in Virgilius, the enemy is here. At this point we must punctuate so as to make high, a clamour of hastening soldiers. The idea belongs to Ennius, who says high, your swords. Thus Virgilius means, shouting high with a great clamour they rushed at the gates. Others read the enemy is here, high. 524 Priscianus, detandio detatandi. Ennius in the annals bear also stripped he the joyful fields, and he took the cities. 525 Servius Octus, on Quinum in Virgilius N_10:6, Quinum, why? For what reason? The expression is Ennian for why do we cut down the legions with the sword? 526 to 8 Gellius, at a sitting where a good many were present, it happened that a book chosen from Ennius' Annals was being read. In that book occurred these lines: the proletarii at the country's cost were armed with shield and savage steel, it was they with sentries guarded the city and its walls and forum. 529 Gellius, the particle at, should it be doubled, increases and intensifies the action with which it is connected, as we notice in the annals of Quintus Ennius, unless, in giving this line, my memory is at fault, and then young warriors of Rome approached the walls. 530 Paulus, trifax, a javelin 3 cubits in length, it is shot from a catapult. Ennius or the party wall pelted by long spears might crumble away. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 9/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, 531 Festus, metonymia. Change of names is a trope which comes about when a lesser thing is given its meaning from a greater one. For example, Ennius has with a great crackle the breeze blew up Vulcan's blaze. 532 Scholiast, on interior loci in Terentius Heud _2.316, loci is redundant. Ennius the flame there, when it had been tossed about in a fierce whirl. 533 Naval affairs. Isidorus, agia means the footways, the spaces in a ship along which the boatswain approaches the rowers. On this Ennius has many wares he put in the gangway, and the long passage was filled full. 534 to 5 Servius Octus, on at whose bidding the earth first gave birth to the neighing horse in Virgilius George _112. But some read cui prima fermentum fudit aquam, because old writers used the term fremitus for the murmuring of water. Ennius and Neptune's water roared with ships. 536 Servius, on and the river of Lethe which floats in front of the peaceful dwellings in Virgilius N_6705, prenated, flows by. Thus it was Ennius whom he followed, who says, and floating billows. 537 Servius Octus, temera means without cause. Ennius, no chance is it that you steer sad at heart. 538 Isidorus, clavus is that by which a rudder is guided. On this Ennius has so long as I hold tiller straight and steer the ship. 539 Isidorus, tunzilla, an iron or wooden hook to which, when it is fixed on the shore, ships' hawsers are tied. On this Ennius has they pierced through the beach and tied up the hooked mooring stakes. 540 Servius, ex plebo numerum Virgilius, N_6545. Ex plebo means I will diminish. For Ennius says they unfilled themselves from the ships and filled up the land. 541 Scholiast, on Virgilius, and Father Porcinus himself with mighty hand drove him on his way. N_5421, Ennius and with mighty hand the river drove the Romans on. www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 10/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, 542 Gellius. Furthermore, why does he Julius Hyginus not call to task Quintus Ennius also, who in the annals uses preeps not of the wings of Daedalus, but of something quite different? Brundisum, surrounded by a beautiful fair haven. 543 Porphyrio, on speaking two tongues like a man of Canisum in Horatius Sat _1.1038, bilinguous is the term used because the Canusians used both languages, Greek and Latin. On that account therefore both Ennius and Lucilius write a Brutian speaking two languages. 544 Festus. Ennius seems to have jested and elsewhere thence. Paros. Were wailing. 545 Consentius, poets make metaplasms when they of set purpose leave a wrong spelling uncorrected. Ennius, to him of my forefathers did I raise in my bereavement a statue at Athens, by a metaplasm he has taken away, from Orbatus, the letter R. 546 Cicero, for if now men who have seen the gate of the Euxine Sea and the narrows through which passed the ship which was called Argo, or those who saw the familiar straits of the ocean where the greedy wave parts Europe and Libya, think they have achieved something, whatever kind of spectacle think we it will be when we shall be allowed to gaze on the whole earth? 547 to 8 Miscellaneous. Scholiast, on Virgilius George _242, not all of it do I ask to embrace in my verses, not if I were to have 100 tongues and 100 mouths and a voice of iron. Not if I and the rest. The idea is taken from Homer IL_2487. And thus also writes Ennius, not if I were to have 10 mouths with which my tongue could have skill to speak words without number, and my heart and breast were fast bound in iron. 549 Augustinus. But for my part I think that the remark of Ennius, all mortal men long to be themselves acclaimed, should be partly approved of and partly avoided. 550 Servius. On Virgilius he wakened cruel slaughter that spared none, and let loose all the reins of wrath. N_12 499, the reins of wrath here he used a moderate expression, for Ennius says let chariots of wrathfulness loose like a flood. 551 Macrobius, eructo, is derived from a verb irigo. Ennius www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 11/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, he scorned the springs whence spurts out a rush of water. 552 Servius, on a passage in Virgilius N_9163, they tilted up the brazen bowls, they drained at a draught. It is also a half-line of Ennius. 553 Gellius, Varro discusses and distinguishes most acutely the difference between a half and halved, and he says that Quintus Ennius in the Annals was wise when he wrote, just as if a man were to bring a halved beaker of wine, the missing part of that beaker should be spoken of as half, not halved. 554 Festus, on poison, whose color is changed by adulteration, for example Ennius when he says when that proverb by the poison with which it is imbued. 555 Festus, solemn, earth. Ennius. But when she had passed swiftly over the fields of earth. 556 Carisius, partum. Ennius, and by then almost of 4 parts. 557 Isidorus, and the parts of the sky are the hollow, the axis, the hinges, the vaults, the poles, and the hemispheres. Hollow is so called because it holds the sky. Whence Ennius hardly to fill with terrors the hollow alone of the sky. 558 Isidorus, they say that teams of 4 run on wheels because this our universe runs out its course through the swiftness of its orbit, or because of the sun, since it wheels in a circular revolution. Thus Ennius says then the white wheel laid open the sky with its rays. Servius, on Virgilius when they have rolled the wheel through 1,000 years N_6748, and further this expression is Ennian. 559 Priscianus, liber also they use to inflect both as a masculine and as a neuter noun. Ennius in the Annals meanwhile the white brilliance of Hyperion sped away on its course. 560 Servius, on Virgilius, and from uplifted nostrils they send out breaths of light N_12 115, this is a line of Ennius with a change in the order of words. For that poet says www.adeluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 12/13 April 1, 22, 3:01 a.m. Ennius, translation of Fragments, 3, and they pour out a flood of light from nostrils uplifted. 561 Servius, on Virgilius, a place teeming with furious southerlies N_151, southerlies. This is a figure of speech, namely, the particular for the general, which is frequent in Virgilius. He had read in Ennius with raging winds 562 Osburn, hoc momen, general momenus, for momentum. Whence Ennius without impulse of yours, O you winds. 563 Servius, on Virgilius, a foal of high-bred stud lifts a high pace in the fields and places a pliant leg George_376, lifts a high pace, advances with a kind of prancing. Places a pliant leg, Ennius on cranes and they creep through the bean field, placing a pliant leg. 564 Carisius, Virgilius has Olemedio N_3354, and Ennius in the Annals has of the fruit-bearing earth. 565 Gellius, Ennius too wrote rectos cupressos against the accepted gender of the word, in this line pines with nodding heads, and straight cypresses. Adelus home page 29.02.16. Any comments? www.adaluz.org/poetry/nnews3.html 13/13.